Hello, welcome back to GOT. Today we're going to talk about the iPhone 17 Pro versus Samsung devices, more specifically the Z Fold 7 and the S25 Ultra. Let's go. I've already compared the iPhone 17 Pro to the Pixel 10 Pro, as well as the iPhone Air and another foldable. But today we're going to focus on Samsung devices because a lot of folks switch back and forth from the Apple to the Samsung, especially in the US. So we're going to cover those. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and cover the similarities, and then we're going to talk about what's different and do some photo and video comparing, as well as some performance tests. So let's start with the visual. Of course, you've got the iPhone now. I've got the iPhone Pro. I didn't get the iPhone Pro Max because that is just a huge phone. I don't really go for the big, gigantic phones, say like even the S25 Ultra, because they're just so big to handle and hard to maneuver around in my hand. I just don't care for that when it's closed. You know, if I'm gonna have a large phone, I'm gonna have the foldable and use it with two hands. But this right here, this is so hard for me to handle with one hand. So when you look at the two of them here, you've got, of course, a huge size. So I'm going to go ahead and size down to the Z Fold 7 because it's just easier to handle and deal with. So when you look at them, they're all pretty much the same, very classy. And of course, this year you got the same look on the Samsung with the three cameras, and really the same look with the iPhone as well. It's just that they extended that bar all the way across, kind of copying the Pixel in that area. And this is a unibody frame, so they can put some of the hardware inside this popped out portion, giving it more space for a cooling chamber inside and more battery. Whereas Samsung with the Z Fold, they kind of went the opposite direction. They went thinner and didn't really upgrade the battery, and there's not much of a cooling chamber in there, but it hasn't really given us a lot of improvement on performance. So we'll talk about that in a moment. I've covered this on other videos. You know, when you look at the buttons here, of course, Apple has their volume control on one side and an action button here where you can program that. And then on the other side is where they have their power button and a camera button, where everything is on one side on the Samsung. You've got the rocker arm and you have a touch ID power button, which really helps it to turn on really fast. Where on the S25 Ultra, of course, you got the three cameras and you got a couple extras, which is really nice to give this thing a little more flair. But again, same thing. No buttons on this side. All the buttons are together, which is the volume and the power button. So if you're going from an Apple to a Samsung, there is a little bit of a learning curve trying to figure out where the power button is. And, you know, switching back and forth as much as I do, it gets kind of confusing. So that's one thing to remember. And of course, the iPhone has this nice curve to it where the Samsungs are squared off around the edges. Even the Z Fold, I really don't care for that much. And they did round the S25 Ultra a little more, or squared it off a little more, I guess, from the previous model. And I don't like the sharp edges. Now, Apple used to have the sharp edges. They kind of moved away from that. And they went even a little more round from last year's model, which last year is a little curve here at the edge, but not as much as this year. And of course, they went a little thicker this year, which I know a lot of you out there don't really care for things getting thin, but I personally don't care for them getting thicker either. So that's what we've got to deal with. Now, I'll show you up here in the drop down camera. You can see, I think the Z Fold actually is a little bit thinner in look anyway than the iPhone for sure, but it's not. It's just a slight bit thicker. You lay them here on the table, you can see, and I'll show you here from my table cam. You see here for pushing together, you can't quite see it here, but it actually looks like the iPhone's a little bit thicker. Well, let's do the level test because the level does not lie. So basically the way it works is you just take the level and you put it right on the two of them, as long as they're on a flat surface, and you can see that the bubble is actually leaning towards the iPhone. That means the iPhone is thicker in this scenario, and you can see it here from my table cam. The bubble is a little bit more towards the iPhone, and if we take and push this just a slight bit, you see it just lifts up and leaves a gap underneath the Z Fold. So the Z Fold is actually thinner. Go over here to the cameras. What do we get on the cameras? On the cameras, it changes size. You can see here now it's thicker on the Z Fold with the cameras. Now, of course, we could have just looked at the dimensions. This one says it's 8.8 millimeters thick, and this one says it's 8.9 millimeters thick when folded. But as you saw there in the test, it wasn't quite so. The Z Fold is a little bit thinner. And when you talk about weight, this is 207 grams versus 215. So the iPhone is a bit lighter than the Z Fold. Now, when you talk about the S25 Ultra, this feels like a brick compared to the iPhone, but it is quite a bit larger. So you take both of them out of your pocket and to turn them on, you just touch with the Z Fold and it's on. The iPhone will come on, but you have to swipe up to actually get to the screen. But before that, take a look at my lock screen. I really like the way they both set up. You can actually do a really nice scene here, and they're very similar, but the iOS is a lot better. You can get this to look like a 3D image here, and I think you can probably see it there in the overhead camera. It's really nice how the date is actually behind our picture. I really like that effect, where here on the Samsung, you can't do that. It's just there, and you can move it up and down, but you can't give you that 3D effect. Yeah, as you can see, you can have a lock screen background image and a background image on the phone. Very much the same. Now, when you look at the two screens side by side, it looks like the Z Fold is actually more narrow, but it's not. And when you turn them here and put them side by side here like this, you can see that the Z Fold is either just as wide or maybe even a little bit wider than the iPhone 17 Pro. But we know it's a larger screen because it is a 6.5-inch versus a 6.3 on the iPhones. Now, another thing about the Samsung is you can actually really customize the home screen any way you want it. As you can see here, you can move apps around. You can actually shrink or enlarge the file folders here, like just by long pressing, you can shrink it down. Of course, I like to vary them, have some different large ones, and you can do whatever you want as far as placement of these things. As you can see here, my wife's face is exposed, so I can see it here. On the Apple, you can't do that. You can take these apps and you can move them around, but it automatically fills the gap. It used to be with just long press, and then it wiggles. There you go. Now I move it here, it fills in another one, and then I take this one and I move it here. Oh wait, look. Oh my goodness, I got it to sit. That's crazy. Um, so it was a hit and miss. It accidentally did that, I think, because that's not normal. Anyway, there we go. Exposed my wife's face. So very good. So maybe I was wrong on that, and that's a great thing if you can actually leave gaps in there. So that's nice. I like doing that. So as far as larger apps, you have the larger folders here on the last page here, and this is really just kind of a, I don't know, a storage page where it actually segregates all your different apps into different areas, utilities, creativity. It automatically does that. You can't do that yourself. You can't even place them in the folder that you want them in. You could take them out just by pressing it and moving it out. You could take it out, but of course you can see it's still in there, but you can move them out, but you cannot put any in there. And you can double them up here and create small folders, but you cannot create larger folders like you can over here. And then of course, you've got your news feed here on both. Like the full page news feed you get on Samsung. On Apple, it's not quite the same. But you can do a news feed and you can customize them both. And you do have widgets here on both where you can actually customize the widgets, which is really nice feature on both. And then you have the control panel on both of them. So now both of these, you got the control panel here in the top corner. You just kind of swipe down, there you go. And on the iPhone, you can hit this plus button here, and then you can add more controls just by hitting this button here. On the Samsung, you hold the or you press the little pencil button and you go into edit, and you can edit this screen here. And then when you're done, you hit done. When you're done here on Apple, what do? I guess you just hit any open space and it goes back. But what's really nice about the Samsung is you can swipe over here to your notifications, okay? Because your notifications are up here on the left side. That's just the way I set it up. You can set it up so they both drop at the same time, but I like doing it separately. So over here, you got your controls and you get to swipe to get to your notifications. Over here on the iPhone, you can't swipe. The only way to get over here to the notifications is go back home and then swipe the notification side. Now, I don't understand why they don't work together. That's just kind of bothersome. But, again, that's Apple. They do things their own way. And at least they've given us a lot of customizations now with the iPhone and the apps. So that's a good thing. And I really do like this translucent liquid glass feature, because it looks like glass. It's really kind of cool. I like that effect versus this here is it's just clear and it's not as smooth. This is like really smooth. Here it's not. It just appears. It doesn't scroll down. I like the animation better on the iPhone. What can I say? Hey, I want to take a quick second to tell you how much I appreciate for watching this video on the iPhone 17 Pro versus Samsung devices. If you get something out of this video, please smash that like button down below. It does help out the channel. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get back to the video. Now, that's really as far as I want to go as far as comparing iOS to Android, because there's a lot to it and a lot more you could go to, and that's a whole nother video, and maybe I'll do that at some point. But let's go ahead and look at the cameras now. The cameras on both of them, like I said, you've got 3 cameras on these two. Now, if we talked about the S25 Ultra, you've got an extra 2 cameras, so no, it's not quite an even playing field. But let's go ahead and stay with the Z Fold for now, and we'll throw some photos in on that one as well. So looking at the two of them again, you have the 3 cameras, and on the iPhone, you have all 3 are 48 megapixel cameras now, which is great. You have the 48 megapixel ultra wide, 4 times zoom, and then your main shooter, which is a 48 megapixel. Now, supposedly the zoom is a larger sensor, so it gets better images than the 5 times zoom on the previous model. But if you want to check that out, check out this video here, because I didn't find that to be the case. And then on the Z Fold, you do still have the same cameras you've had for the last 5 years, other than a 200 megapixel main shooter. Now, we'll see the photos on that. You would assume those would take better pictures than the iPhone. So you've got the 200 main shooter, and then you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide and a 10 megapixel zoom lens, which to me is 4 years overdue for upgraded cameras. But let's check them out. Okay, we got video going on here. It's kind of walking down towards the sunlight, as you can see. How are they doing in direct sunlight? This is a place I do come to quite a bit because I've got a lot to look at, a lot of color, a lot of things to really gauge on clarity. So we're going to take a look at some of this stuff here. And judge how these things do in this sunny or cloudy day. Looky there at the range there. How are they doing? Can you see in the shadows, or is the sun making it difficult for these things to adjust? We're gonna get into some really good color here. As you can see, got quite a bit of color going on here. One of these is actually drowning out the sound. Can you hear it? We've got right here the Z Fold 7. How was it doing? How is it catching my sound? iPhone 17 Pro, is it blocking out any sound? Here we have the Samsung S25 Ultra. Is it able to block any of the sound from the highway, or is it picking everything up? We'll find out here once we get back to the studio. Okay, as you can see here, I got the Z Fold 7 right here on the left and the iPhone 17 Pro here on the right. And we will mix in some of the S25 here, as you can see here, into some of these, just so we can see the comparison. As you can see right here in the midday, and it was quite a cloudy day out, but it makes for good photos. So we can see here that the iPhone is a little bit brighter, and they both have great dynamic range, but I think the Samsung actually saturates quite a bit more, which is, it goes back and forth between the two of them. But as you can see, it's a great shot here. And if we go to the S25 Ultra actually went a little brighter. So it matches the iPhone a little bit more on this shot here. So this is quite interesting. And you can see the clarity. It almost looks to me like the iPhone is a little bit clearer. And I simply think that is because it is a larger file here. As you can see, it's 3 megabytes versus, well, 3.2, but we know that Apple does its 24 megapixel bending. So these are actually a little bit larger pixels on this photo. So it is a little bit clearer. We'll zoom in just a little bit. However, the Z Fold has its 200 megapixel camera. So you think this would be quite a bit clearer. And let's zoom in a couple more clicks on that building. And you can see, okay, so the Samsung does look a little bit clearer when you crop in, but just from the base image, you can't really see a whole lot of difference. So 200 megapixel doesn't do a lot of good here. So we're going to zoom in on both of them here. This is, I believe, a 4 times zoom on both because that's what the iPhone does by default. So the 4 times zoom comes out really nice here. You can see, again, I think you see a lot more dimension here in the iPhone. It's a lot cleaner. I'm just looking at this right here. It just kind of blends right here on the Z Fold. I am on the Z Fold, yes. It just kind of blends right there. It's supposed to be a larger photo with the 200 megapixel. I think the iPhone is definitely winning on this one, and we'll go ahead a couple clicks in here, and we'll see. It's still, I think, a lot clearer on the iPhone. Everything looks kind of mushed here on the Z Fold, if mush is a word. So let's go into 10 times here on both of them. 10 times, it looks like the iPhone's doing better. Again, the iPhone's using its 4 megapixel or 4 times zoom lens to zoom in, and I think it's doing better. You got more detail. You can even see it here on the roof, where on the Z Fold here at 10 times, it's just kind of mush. But let's see what the S25 Ultra does on 10 times because it has its dedicated camera. Well, I don't think it's doing much better. I think the iPhone is blowing it away. Yeah, the iPhone is still a lot cleaner, I think. Everything's blurred. And this is a 10 times dedicated zoom. Of course, it's 10 megapixels versus 48 over here. So that's the huge difference, I guess. iPhone is doing a whole lot better. Not only does it have a 48 megapixel zoom, it's doing that 24 megapixel bending down instead of 12 over here on the S25 Ultra. So the iPhone is really taking the win here. And let's go in a little bit further here. This, I believe, is 20 times zoom, and we'll get that 20 times zoom here on the Z Fold. iPhone takes it again with ease. I think the Samsung is struggling here on the Z Fold. And did I do it on the S25? I did a 40 times on the S25. I didn't do a 25. So let's jump up to the 40. Here's the 40 on the iPhone. This is where things get a little murky, and there's quite a bit of waviness in the lines. So the iPhone, I think, is still clear. It's a more pleasant image. You wouldn't want to use a 40 times zoom. Here's the 40 times on the Z Fold. The Z Fold just kind of loses it because it's using a 10 megapixel camera as well. But it doesn't have, its base is at, 5 times versus the base on the Z Fold is using that 10 times camera. So it's a little bit clearer, but Apple still has them beat. So there's the daylight shots. I think the iPhone wins hands down. And you can see the iPhone, again, is a little bit brighter, a little bit cleaner and clearer on the night shot. This is your standard view here. And if we go to the S25 Ultra, it's about the same. Ultra's a little bit better than the Z Fold. Z Fold's, everything's just a little bit darker, not as clear. You get a little bit brighter on the S25 Ultra, so it does a little bit better. But I think I like the iPhone, although the iPhone looks a little more daylightish. But let's go on to the next one where we zoom in a little bit. We zoom in and looking at the focus on this tree here, you can see that the Z Fold is at 5 times where the iPhone is at 4 times zoom. But if we go ahead and punch in a little bit, crop in, and look at that tree, you can see that there's a bit more detail on the iPhone, and we get a little more blurry here on the Z Fold. And even if we do it on the S25 Ultra, and we're looking probably about the same, not as clear as the iPhone, although neither one of them are really all that clear. So I think the S25 Ultra did do a little bit better than the Z Fold on this one. So let's go in and look down the sidewalk a little further. This is actually, I believe, the same 5 times zoom I think we put on both of them just to test it. And it looks to me like the iPhone did a little bit better. Again, you can actually see the lines down here on this house at the end of this, and things just a little bit clearer, I think, on the iPhone, where the Z Fold still not quite as clear, and the S25 Ultra is a little bit clearer than the Z Fold. It appears you get a little more detail, but still, I think the iPhone did a whole lot better at this night shot. Let's go on to the next one. We go all the way down the sidewalk. They all capped out around, I think, 10 for the night here, and you can see here that the iPhone definitely a lot better. Look at the blinds down here. Everything's much clearer. Everything's all mangled up here on the Z Fold. And how about on the S25 Ultra? S25 Ultra did a lot better because it's using that 10 times zoom lens. But again, I don't think as clear as the iPhone. Well, it might be a little, I don't know. I can't hardly tell. I like the way the iPhone brightened things up a little bit, but this is going to be personal preference. But I think the iPhone did a really good job with having a 4 times zoom lens versus a 10 times zoom lens. But again, that's 48 megapixels versus 10. So there you go. I think even the night shots, the iPhone won this one. Well, there you go. There's the cameras. You tell me in the comments, what did you think? Which one looked better? Now let's go right into some performance tests on these things. And what I've done is, in the past, I've done performance tests against the iPhone with other manufacturers, and I've gotten complaints, or let's say nice comments, saying that I did it unfairly. A couple of things. One is I didn't use the exact same video on either one of them. What I did, I used my live walking video on each of them and processed those, and the iPhone lost. So this time, what I did was I transferred the iPhone's video, so that they're all the same, to the Samsung phone. So the Samsung is going to process the iPhone's video. I also transferred that on my Champion, which is the Honor Magic V5. And we're going to go ahead and run it at the same time. Now you see I've got all 4 of them all ready to export that iPhone video, and we're going to go ahead and make sure they're all exporting at the same rate: 4K, 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 4K. And you can see that the Androids are all the same size at 1,854 megabytes, where the iPhone is at 799. And that's because, yes, the iPhone compresses more, but you cannot change that. Doesn't matter what app I've tried. Apple has their own compression. That's what you got to live with. So that's what's going to work in the speed test. We're going to see how it does compared to these others. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the iPhone and the Z Fold 7 first. I'm going to hit the start button here on the timer, and then I'll connect the other two, and we'll see how they do. Ready, go. Timer, go. Okay, now they're all going pretty strong. And we can see already that the Z Fold is actually outperforming the iPhone on this export. Now, you would think that the S25 Ultra, because it has the Elite chip, but so do these other two. They have the Elite chip, but you think because it has a better cooling chamber, the S25 Ultra would do better. We're going to see what happens in this test. I would think that the Z Fold is going to throttle, and maybe even the automatic V5 might throttle. But we're going to find out here. I'm going to be quiet. We'll speed through this and get up to 50%. Now the Z Fold 7 is at 50% already, you can see. So it's keeping its lead there. It's not, doesn't seem to be throttling or slowing down. The iPhone's actually the slowest of the bunch, and you all can have your own reasoning for that. So, and then the S25 Ultra is actually outperforming the Honor Magic V5 in this test. Okay, we got the first lap done, which was the Z Fold 7. It's finished, and it looks like right behind it is going to be the S25 Ultra. So we'll catch that lap here when it's done. All right, and then it looks like the third one is going to be, of course, the automatic B5, and taking up last place is the iPhone 17 Pro. All right, there we go. We got the automatic V5, just barely behind the Z Fold. Well, another 15 seconds. So, okay, there you go. You got all three of them time, and it looks like of course, we see that the Z Fold 7 finished first at a minute and 46 seconds. That's pretty good. And then right behind it was the S25 Ultra at 2:01. Then we got the automatic V5 at 2:12, and then the iPhone at 3 minutes and 33 seconds, more than twice as long as a Z Fold 7. And I know some of you out there that are iPhone users are going to be in a little bit denial, thinking that I cheated and did something on this test. But for some reason, I'd say a couple years ago, the creators that did a lot of these speed tests have stopped doing them, and they definitely stopped the testing a comparison of the rendering, the video rendering, because Apple used to blow away the competition. But I think ever since the Gen 3 or the AI chips that they started putting in these Android phones, the iPhone started rendering slower, or at least the others got faster. So something's going on. Apple needs to work on that if they want to become the rendering king once again. So let's talk about the battery real quick. On the Z Fold 7, it's got the smallest battery of a foldable. It's 4,400 milliamps, and it barely gets you through the day. And matter of fact, at the end of the day, I'm somewhere around 30%. Okay. So you've got to plug it in. So it's a day use only. Where the iPhone, it's a smaller battery at something like 3,800 and something, but it'll easily get me through the day. And by the end of the day, it's still at like 70%. So this thing is the battery champ because it's optimized so well. Even the S25 Ultra, which is 5,000 milliamp hour battery, it'll do better than the Z Fold, but it won't do quite as well as the iPhone. It's still somewhere around 60% at the end of the day. But, if you want a longer lasting battery, you got to get these two phones. Now let's take a real quick look at video playing on both of these for entertainment or consumption. And see, I got them both here on the GOT channel. And as you can see here, they both are very good and compatible. You've got the line up here that you have on your typical bar phone, just a straight line. But this still gives you kind of a tablet view where you have two lines. So it's just a little bit different. It all depends on personal preference. But the big difference is when you open this thing up on the Z Fold, you look at that, that is just a huge difference. And now you've got a big display, and you can actually even turn the Z Fold this way and get an even larger screen. Now I'm going to show you a couple things here on both of them where they really separate how they operate, and my preference is going to be pretty obvious here. So if you open up a video on both of them, you can see they play, and just here in the view portion, you can continue to browse, and you can see its preview video is much larger. And then of course, if you want to get larger on the iPhone, you have to turn the phone to the side like so, and then it still barely competes with your preview here where you got a lot more you can do. Of course, on the Z Fold, you just go full screen, and there's just no comparison. And then of course, you can even zoom in on the Z Fold, and you still get a really nice display where you can actually see most of the video. Where on the iPhone, if you were to zoom out, oops, double tap, right? Double tap. No, guess that's an Android thing. Okay, so you go ahead and zoom in a little bit to get to a full screen. So that's not too bad. And you can see the big difference here when you go full screen on both of them. Now, if you just watch it in its native form. So now, of course, if you got the iPhone Max, you'd have a lot bigger screen. It'd be more similar to that of the S25 Ultra. So you can see it's getting a little closer as far as size goes, but still not quite as good as using a foldable. Because of course, again, you can enlarge the foldable, and you can't quite do the same thing with a bar phone. Now, I know there's somebody out there that want to hear the sounds. Let's go ahead and play the sound on each of them. Got my microphone right here. We're going to put it right there between the two of them, and we're going to go ahead and play the sound And let's go ahead and close this up and use it this way and compare them this way. So I'm going to go ahead and play the sound on both of them. You got speakers up front and on the bottom on both of them. And of course, the Samsung's actually right at the top. So let's go ahead and turn up the volume here on this one. And I forget it's on this side of the iPhone there, but they are very bright outside. Matter of fact, the iPhone is 3,000 nits versus supposed to be 5,000 nits on the Honor Magic, but I'm not really seeing that difference. And then we'll turn it up here on the on, as you just saw there, versus the iPhone. I touch the power button and power button's on the other side. I touch the power button, it comes on, but I do need to swipe. The other foldable there is the Vivo X Fold 5 to get it to come on. And there's a home screen. So there's, which you can see, it has a not a whole lot of difference between the two of them. I'd say you get a little bit louder on the iPhone, but not a lot. And if we were to throw the S25 Ultra in the picture, it's going to be quite a bit louder, I think. Thicker when it comes to the camera. Now let's do some real comparisons between the two, and we're going to cover some misconceptions about foldables. Entire reflective screen protector on it. So they're all three right about the same, and a lot of those were derived from the Samsung Fold. So the S25 Ultra is actually a little bit louder than both of them, but you can see that the Z Fold did really good in this test as far as the sound. With this thing being as thin as it is, it's really good. And then, of course, the Z Fold has the speakers on the sides on both of them, so you're going to get a little bit better separational sound or spatial sound, I guess, from the Z Fold. And of course, you got the much larger display. So now it's time to hear from you. What do you think? Was this a fair comparison? Because there's a lot of folks out there that say this is not a fair comparison. You can't compare a foldable to a bar phone. Well, I'm here to show you that you can, number one. And number two is a lot of folks out there think that foldables are just gimmicks and they're going to be gone soon. Well, that's not quite so, because Apple is actually coming out with their first foldable next year. So it's been proven that they're here to stay. So Apple's going to get in the game. So let me know down in the comments, what did I miss? Is there something that I could have done to really test these even further? Let me know. And if you haven't already seen the video on the iPhone versus the Honor Magic V5, you want to check that out here. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.